Joining us now from Washington, Republican Senator from Florida, Marco Rubio, and Democratic Senator from Delaware, Coons, who are joining forces to push a bipartisan jobs bill. Senators, thanks very much for being on the show this morning. Marco Rubio, I'll start with you because the president, when he put his jobs bill forward, said there were many things in his plan that the Republicans have supported in the past or could agree with. Why not just go with his bill?
Well, there are things on it that we can't support, and that's the point of this. You know, I think there are some significant issues between our parties, and that's why we have elections and hopefully a debate over the next year on those issues. But there are things we agree on, hence the title of the bill. And what we did wasn't really that complicated. We sat down, took the different plans, the president's plan, the Democrats' plan, the Republican plan, and identified things that were in all three plans, or things that had been filed in a bipartisan way, and kind of assembled them into one piece of legislation. And I think what we're saying is, let's pass the things we agree on, and let's have an election about the things we don't agree on. But we can't just sit around for another 12 months and bicker. We've got to get some progress done.
But isn't this, I mean, we've got a lot of different bills and plans coming forward. Coons, Senator from Delaware, people are getting frustrated that there's just a lot of talking and a lot of plans going out there and nothing happening while unemployment continues to get worse and people are waiting for something to happen. What is it about this plan that will break through, or should we just move on?
Well, Mika, that's exactly the point. We're both well aware there's 14 million Americans out of work, folks in Delaware and Florida who contact our offices every day and are looking for action. So we assembled a whole series of different proposals that deal with things from immigration, trade, tax, investment, invention, innovation, R&D, and we're putting them together. These ideas were borrowed from a lot of different sources. Senator Casey, for example, was the source of the idea to encourage veterans to become entrepreneurs by buying franchises. The president's jobs bill was the source of several of them. The president's council on competitiveness and jobs was another one. What we did was to assemble from a variety of sources what we believed were good common sense ideas so we can show to the people of the United States there are Republicans and Democrats willing to work together in the interest of getting people back to work.
So, Chris Matthews, what do you think is going on here when you listen to these gentlemen talk? And I'll let you take it away with a question. Well, but is this undermining the president's jobs bill, or is this good for the conversation?
Well, my concern is that the numbers don't get credibility on the world financial markets. And Senator Rubio, do you think it's fair to include numbers like we project a revenue increase based on this deal that'll come about through dynamic scorekeeping, that we can't really point to increased revenues by law, but they will occur because the economy will be healthier? Is that fancy bookkeeping, or is that for real?
Well, I don't know if you're talking about the super committee or our specific bill.
The super committee.
Yeah, well, on the super committee front, I believe that in economic growth, and I do think that tax policy and regulatory reform can lead to economic growth. That's the big fight up here.
But do you believe that's a fair way of bookkeeping, of saying,
I think it has to be
we're going to get greater economic growth, therefore we're going to get more revenues, therefore we don't have to raise taxes?
Well, I think it's an element of it. There's no doubt about that. The problem is it's hard to predict it. I'll concede that, but here's the bottom line on it. It has to be a factor because we believe in economic growth. I mean, if you look at tax policies in the past, particularly tax certainty and tax reform, there's a lot of talk in this building about tax rates, increasing taxes, lowering taxes. I think what everybody agrees on is that the tax code we have right now is unfair, it's burdensome, it's complicated. There's a growing consensus about let's simplify it, let's make it fair, let's make sure that everyone's not only paying their fair share, but at the same time that we're not hurting economic growth. And but unfortunately, we can't get a lot of traction or movement on it, and so that's stuck in the mud.
Senator Rubio, Chris, one of the provisions of this bill would move forward by a year the accelerated depreciation and expensing, which would put as much as $85 billion in the hands of small businesses. Access to capital is one of the major barriers to job growth by small business, which creates, by some estimates, 2/3 of jobs in this country. That's something we can agree on. I think the lack of confidence in Congress, the lack of confidence in the American people that we can get things done by working together is one of the big drags in our economy. We put this bill forward as a way to provide an answer to that concern.
Mike, go ahead.
Hey, Senator Coons, I don't want you to have a Herman Cain moment now and pause for about 15 seconds in order to answer this question, but surprise us. Give us 3 or 4 examples within the tax code, reforming the tax code, that you think Republicans and Democrats could agree on that would increase widen the revenue stream?
Well, the one that I've particularly championed that's included in this bill and that I think should gain wide support is to reform, for an example, the R&D tax credit. There's a research and development tax credit that has been allowed to expire and then been extended, I think, 16 times. We are just weeks away from it expiring. And certainty about the availability of a tax benefit is one of the major barriers to companies investing in R&D. By some estimates, making it permanent would create hundreds of thousands of jobs. This bill includes a proposal that would encourage companies who invent things here to make them here by giving them an expanded credit if they invent things here and make them here. So R&D tax credit reform in this bill would encourage making it permanent, expanding the simplified credit, and giving a credit for making here what you invent here. I think that's common sense tax policy. Lots of Americans of all different backgrounds and parties believe we need to invest in manufacturing. We need to get our competitive edge back.
Senator Rubio, I want to go back to where Chris was going, because I ran a business, and as a fiscal conservative, rule number one is you never project the upside when you're putting numbers together. You project the worst case scenario. And the problem with this country, we always thought housing prices were going to go up, and we know that doesn't happen. And the fundamental flaw is that you are projecting all of your revenues based on economic growth that we don't know is there. And if you came to me with that business plan as a CEO, I would say, sir, go back. This is not the way we run a business.
Well, first of all, again, I don't know. You guys are asking me about the super committee. I'm not on it. Chris is not on it. I've read media accounts about what they're producing, but quite frankly, and I think it's one of the reasons why I personally was against the super committee concept, you know, we're not involved in the deliberations. And by the way, neither are you guys. I mean, we don't know publicly. The public doesn't know what these discussions are, and so we can't have an informed debate on what you're asking me about. But on your point, let me say this. Look, we have to reduce spending. We certainly have to hold the line on spending in this country. We have to include tax reform, and I believe regulatory reform. But ultimately, the number one thing we can do to get out of this deficit hole that we're in, this debt hole, is to grow the economy. Economic growth is the single biggest thing that we can do. What I've argued is we need new taxpayers, new people working, paying into the tax system, spending money into the economy. And I think there's agreement on that. I think what there's disagreement about is what kinds of measures can government take to accomplish that. And that's a very legitimate debate, and I think that's what 2012 should be about. I hope that's what the election is about. But the point of this bill is we're not going to sit here for the next 11 months cashing a check every 2 weeks, because we get paid to do this job and not do anything. On the things we agree on, what people are saying to me in Florida is, why are you guys fighting on the things you agree on? Well, what we did is we went out and assembled a bunch of things we agree on. Let's pass those things. If this kind of bill doesn't pass, we're in bigger trouble than I thought we were.
And Chris Coons, have you been talking to Senator Rubio about other ways of bringing in revenue?
We have. We had a very broad conversation. The senators and our staff, we sat down as a group over the last month and started with a much broader range of issues and hammered it down to those that we thought deserved bipartisan support. We weren't trying to put out a bill that we thought would die on the floor. We weren't trying to put out a bill that was a message bill. This is a bill that contains what we believe to be common sense proposals that ought to get rapid increase in numbers of co-sponsors and ought to get consideration. As Senator Rubio said before, we assembled this from proposals, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate, that have already garnered support. So it's our hope that this will show a common sense set of proposals that could move forward quickly.
All right. Senator Rubio, I just want to ask you about Republican politics for a moment. The Republican presidential field, I'm just curious, do you think that there are some folks on the list that shouldn't be? Who are winning in the polls?
No, you know, the bottom line is that the running for president is not a decision, it's a process, and we're going through that process.
I know, but I'm wondering about your opinion about the quality of the candidates.
My opinion is that they're running, here's my opinion, and I'm not, you know, they're running through the process, and so they're being analyzed on a daily basis, they're being asked questions, and people can judge based on the answers they give or fail to give whether they're qualified.
Okay.
You know, I think one of the things that benefited President Obama, to be quite frank, is that he had a primary that went through all 50 states. So by the time he got to the general election, he was ready to go. I mean, he was tested by Hillary Clinton in ways that, you know, no one's been tested before in a primary, and I think it made him a stronger candidate in the general election.
Absolutely.
And you hope the same will happen in this Republican primary, that folks, as part of this process, will grow, that they'll be forced to think about and learn about issues that perhaps they hadn't thought about before they got in the race, and that's part of the process of electing a president. The difference is, of course, we do it now in a 24-hour news cycle environment with social media, where every word you say is immediately reported by people on both the right and the left, people that agree with you and disagree with you. So we're going through that.
And Senator, asking them questions is certainly part of the process, and I'm just wondering about your opinion. Do you think some of the answers so far have been subpar? from some of the candidates?
I think some of the answers are going to have to be refined, and the candidates would tell you that, I'm sure. That, and you've seen that where they have improved from one debate to the next. But again, you can go back to the Democratic primary and find that was the case as well. People forget, but early in the primary, President Obama did not do well in some of those Democrat debates. And then as the election went on, he got better and better at it. It was the first time he had been on a stage like that. And by the time he got to September and October, we know what happened.
Are you proud and confident in the entire Republican presidential field?
I am confident that we will nominate someone that will be a legitimate and effective alternative to the direction President Obama has taken and wants to continue to take our country. And ultimately, that's what these elections need to be about, and that is a choice between two competing visions of the future. I hope we'll get that choice in 2012, and as a Republican, I'll do everything I can to help that happen.
Mika, I'm sorry, just to pick up what Mika is, Senator, when you watch Herman Cain and you watch the Libya question, and just as you are the new voice of the party, you can't be proud of that. It's not just, oh, it's a process, it's a process. That is the guy that is leading in the polls, and he clearly does not have a command of the issues. We saw that. So you can't be proud of your party when that is the front and center guy.
Well, again, I wasn't there. I don't know how long he'd be up that, and I know he said he was tired, and so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt with regards to the circumstances that led to that answer. But the bottom line is, all of our candidates have to have answers on these issues, and I'm confident that by the time we get to January, February, March, and April, we are going to nominate someone in our party that will have answers to these questions and present a legitimate and effective alternative to the direction the president's taken our country, both on foreign relations and on domestic policies.
Hey, Senator Coons, how happy are you that no one's asking you about Herman Cain?
Well, Senator Rubio and I got to know each other in part through our service on the Foreign Relations Committee. It was actually a strong speech Senator Rubio gave on Libya policy that was one of the opening moments that encouraged me to go and get to know him a little bit better. We have a shared friend, Adrian Arsht, a Delawarean who later was a business leader and a community leader in Miami, who helped introduce us. But it was exactly those sorts of debates about tough questions involving Afghanistan and Pakistan, Libya, and developments in the Middle East that caused us to first get to know each other outside a lot of these partisan issues that so sharply divide us as a Democrat and a Republican.
They had a conversation.
By the way, I'm so impressed, Senators, that you're meeting together. I love the fact that you meet across the aisle, and just you young guys doing this is such a spirited, positive thing. I want to say that both of you probably know more about foreign policy than a couple of these candidates. I grew up with Kennedy and Nixon. I got to tell you, both those guys knew everything. They were totally prepared in their early 40s, like you guys, to be president of the United States. This crowd running for president of the United States are an embarrassment to this country. The fact that this guy, Herman Cain, thinks he ought to be president of the United States without reading the newspaper, everybody watching the show reads the newspaper. They watch a program like this. If they watch Morning Joe, they'd be better educated than they are right now. It's embarrassing that someone like Herman Cain says he ought to be president of the United States, commander-in-chief of our forces, that doesn't know anything about the wars we're fighting, doesn't know anything about what a neocon is, which is the main movement that got us into the Iraq War. What part of the newspaper does he read, Senators? Why don't you just say we need a better team out there, Senator Rubio? I mean, you'd be better than these guys. You know that.
Absolutely.
Aren't you embarrassed by these people? Cain and Perry? I mean, at least Mitt Romney, whatever you think of him, he may be a little wiggly on the issues, but at least he looks like he got up in the morning and read the newspaper. Isn't that the minimal requirement of a politician, to read the paper? I mean, seriously.
Speaking as a Democrat, Chris, I'm looking forward to seeing our vice president, who is a genuine expert on foreign policy, and our president, who I think has a real command of the issues, engaging in the debate that after the primaries will put the core issues in front of the American people. Our focus today was in finding common issues about the #1 issue in front of the American people. How can we get folks back to work? How can we deal with our deficit through growth? And how can we do it in a bipartisan way? And that's what I think we wanted to focus on today.
Gotcha. We focused on it. We're hoping it, in some ways, you find some success with that, honestly. We want jobs in this country, and we want leaders who will speak the truth. Senator Rubio, welcome to the party, but be honest, especially if you know Libya
Senator,
policy.
we need change, sir.
I think we're going to be. I think we're going to be okay. We're going to have a good, solid nominee. The process is ongoing, but we're going to have someone by early part of next year that'll be an effective competition to the president.
Vice President for you, right, Senator Rubio?
No.
Okay. All right, Senators Coons and Rubio, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.